Welcome to an APH Access Academy. Today is Jungle Books, UEB Math Science, and UEB with Nemeth, part 3 of 5 of the Come Back to Me Braille. And I'd like to turn it over to Kyle.
Hello. Leanne gave us an excellent introduction. We're here in Jungle Books. This is part of our Braille adventure, and your fellow travelers on that adventure include myself. My name is Kyle DeJute. My title at APH is Braille Trainer, and there's a picture of me up on the screen. I'm a white woman with short brown hair, and today my little face is put on top of a sort of colorful crayon drawing of an elephant in a simple crayon drawing of a jungle scene with some other animals as well.
And then my name is Dawn Eadens. I'm your other fellow traveler today. And I am also a Caucasian woman with long blondish brown hair. And then my face is also on the drawing, the colorful drawing, and it's on a giraffe, which just happens to be one of my favorite animals.
Let's have a moment to talk about the jungles and how initially all of the sounds and smells, all of the plants and the different things happening in the jungles can seem overwhelming, scary, mysterious. And it doesn't matter what kind of jungle you're in, it can feel that way. And with some time and familiarity, we can get to know that jungle and be able to appreciate how beautiful and endlessly fascinating it is. It can come to feel like a home or a sort of escape instead of somewhere scary. And I think the same thing is true of our beautiful sort of jungles of using Nemeth Code for math and science and using UEB for math and science. Sometimes it feels like a scary jungle, and often if we give it some time and study, we can see a lot of the beauty that's there.
Psalm 30, whatever. And it's time for one of my favorites, hopefully you're all too, a poll. And the first poll we're going to ask you all about is what code or code combination do you usually use when transcribing math science? A option is UEB math science, and then the B option is UEB with Nemeth.
And we'll let that come rolling in. Still growing. And I'll end us at 60%. The results shared, 74% are Nemeth with UEB embedded, 26% UEB math science.
This is usually the part after a poll where we might show which is the right answer. There is no right answer to this poll. The question is what you most often use. It sounds like the crowd that we have today most often uses UEB with Nemeth. So this is going to use the switch indicators. And there's also loads of people who use UEB math science. Again, there's no right answer to which you use more often. It's simply a question about your situation. Since we have more people who use the Nemeth within UEB or UEB with Nemeth, let's start our travel through the jungle in our sort of Nemeth Code jungle. I'd like to take a few moments to share sort of my personal assessment, not even assessment, my personal understanding of the Nemeth Code and some of its characteristics. Again, this is some Nemeth Code characteristics according to Kyle. The Nemeth Code strives to be, like so many of our Braille codes, consistent. So regardless of where you see a fraction, it looks the same. Our Nemeth Code tries to be concise. So as few symbols as is reasonable to accurately communicate the idea. One of the goals of the Nemeth Code, from my understanding, is to use as few symbols as possible. We certainly don't want to make our Braille user travel across multiple Braille lines to get one idea or concept. The Nemeth Code strives to be concise. And I would describe the Nemeth Code as meaning-based. So the Nemeth Code was designed by a mathematician, Dr. Abraham Nemeth, who, being a mathematician, thought about the Braille code for math and science from the perspective of someone who does math and science. And part of his thought process, from my understanding, is that when we think about a concept like addition, the concept of addition is about taking this whatever and this whatever and combining them in order to make a larger whatever, or in order to make a total whatever. And in print, we often represent that with a horizontal straight line and a vertical straight line that cross at 90 degrees. But we could represent the concept of addition with a drawing of a raccoon face or a dancing duck. We could represent the concept of addition with any symbol in any way, and it wouldn't change the actual concept. So that's a starting point, or that was one of the starting points for the design of Nemeth Code, that it be based on meaning. I'm going to stretch the analogy a little too and say, if we're taking a temperature, we could use a digital thermometer to take temperature, and it would give us a reading that we could perhaps see. We could also measure temperature with a mercury in glass thermometer, and it would give us a height of mercury that perhaps we could feel, perhaps we could see. We could also measure temperature even of the same thing that we measured the temperature of with those previous two tools. We could take the temperature with a digital talking thermometer, which would give us that audio feedback about what the temperature is. And if we're measuring the same thing, regardless of what way that measurement is communicated to us, the measurement is the same. The meaning is the same, regardless of what sort of symbol or medium is used to communicate the concept. Again, those are in brief, Nemeth Code characteristics according to Kyle. It's a little philosophical, and I take full responsibility for those perspectives. Let's get some meat and potatoes instead of just Kyle philosophy and read our Jungle Books practice transcription, transcribed using UEB with Nemeth. So this was the homework that we mentioned earlier, and it's simply a 6-item print sheet, which I think was available as a PDF and perhaps also as a Word document. This is the Jungle Book math practice for today, February 12th, 21 APH webinar. And right now we're going to look at the UEB with Nemeth key transcription of that print. Let's start at the very beginning. The title is a centered heading. I treated it as a centered heading. And it has an opening quote, capital jungle, cap book, closing quote, math practice for, hey, it's today, capital Feb, number 12, 2021, all caps, APH webinar. And then our title of the webinar is 3 or more symbols sequences. So it's italicized in an italicized passage, cap jungle, cap books, colon, all caps, UEB. And the last line of our centered heading is cap math / cap science, ampersand, all caps, UEB, with capital Nemeth. And that's finally the end of our italic passage. Let's look at the items themselves. So item number 1 is, it has my math not complete right there in that particular slide. So item number 1 is 2 + 2 = 4. So we open with a Nemeth Code indicator right before the number, and then we're in Nemeth Code, so we're using the low lower cell numbers, 2 plus 2, and that equals 4. Then our item number 2, let me see if my big file is accurate again when we get to item number 2. Item number 2, there we continue with some math material. So we're going to let that Nemeth, I think of it as a bubble. We're going to let the effect of our Nemeth Code switch indicator ride on over the item identifier, because item identifiers we don't take into consideration when we decide where to place code switch indicators. If, in other words, since item number 1 ends with math material and item number 2 starts with math material or technical material, we're going to leave Nemeth Code in effect, because 1 ends with technical material and 2 begins with technical material. And it doesn't matter what our item identifier, in this case 2 period, looks like. So then the content of our item number 2 is x equals open fraction indicator minus b plus the square root of b and our superscript 2 back down on the baseline minus 4ac. That's the end of the square root. So we have our square root terminator. Then our fraction line, and our denominator is lower 2, right? Because we're in Nemeth Code, and a, then our closing simple fraction indicator. Now we've come to the end of item number 2, and item number 3 starts with narrative text. So we're going to terminate our Nemeth Code at the end of item number 2. Then item number 3 simply starts with the words over the weekend, comma, it rained a total of 15 inches. Our 15 is a simple unmodified number, and so it gets no Nemeth Code switching, period. So then our question continues if, and then we have 12.5. It was supposed to be plus or minus after the, I noticed something in the chat about item number 2. Let's back up for a minute and look at, it should be minus b plus minus the square root. We have negative b plus, and it should be plus minus. So there should be a minus symbol there. Why? All right, back up. We can see here in the example slide in the PowerPoint, obviously some files got mixed up in my computer. I mixed up some files in my computer and missed this sign. Item number 2 should be x equals and the open fraction minus b, then plus minus. So the Nemeth Code symbol for plus minus is the plus, which is dots 3, 4, 6, and minus dots 3, 6. Then the opening square root, b squared, minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. So back into item 3, where we have 12.5. That 12.5 is includes a decimal, and that always goes in Nemeth Code. So it's in Nemeth Code switch indicators. The word inches in this context has no reason to be in the Nemeth Code, and so it's outside of the switch indicators. And the text continues, of rain fell on capital Saturday, comma, how many inches of rain fell on capital Sunday, question mark. Let's try again for our big item number 4. In fact, let me see if I can give you this in a more accurate and large format. Come on. There we go. All right, so item number 4, we've got open Nemeth Code indicator because our comparative expression 2 cross multiplier 2 is less than 5 belongs in Nemeth Code. And our cross multiplier symbols are dot 4, dots 1, 6, and our less than symbol is dot 5, dots 1, 3. Then again, item number 4 ends with technical material, and item number 5 starts with technical material. So the Nemeth Code continues. It just rolls on over the item identifier 5 period. And we transcribe that 5 period in the code that's in effect, which is Nemeth Code. So we use the lower cell number, and we use the punctuation indicator, dots 4, 5, 6, before that period, so that the period can't be misread as a 4 in Nemeth Code. Then we have our 6, greater than or equal to. So our 3-cell symbol for greater than or equal to is dots 4, 6, dot 2, and dots 1, 5, 6. X. And we terminate Nemeth code at the end of that because our next item starts with text. Text that is extremely relevant to our title of our current webinar, The Jungle Book. Number 6 deals with capital Mowgli. That's Mowgli. He took a fraction, and not just any fraction. He took a simple fraction with a slash fraction line. So if we examine the print, we can see this is not a 1 directly over a 2, but rather they're sort of slashy related to each other instead of being stacked right on top of each other. That's what this fraction line 4, 5, 6, 3, 4 means. Then once that fraction is over, we terminate Nemeth code so we can continue our narrative text of capital Baloo's, that's apostrophe S. Number 10, mangoes, period. Capital how many mangoes did Cap Mowgli take, question mark. And then we've reached the end of our UEB with Nemeth transcription of the homework assignment for today. Okay.
Now we have some primary sources for UEB with Nemeth. And we're going to start with the first primary source is Banna's page on the Nemeth code, which includes a scan of the typeset or the print of the Nemeth code, updates to the code, also guidance for use within UEB or with UEB, and then BRFs of all of the above. And the Green Book, if the following are added. And by the Green Book, it's the Nemeth Braille Code for Mathematics and Science Notation, the 1972 revision edition. Updates, and then guidance for that Green Book.
So those are our primary sources. Let me go back 1 minute. Those are our primary sources for UEB with Nemeth. There are lots of other places we can look for information about these codes. And like other codes, lesson books, cheat sheets, trainings, all of those are based on these primary sources. Okay, let's take a quick refresher look at some of the symbols for UEB with Nemeth. So since we're sort of nesting the Nemeth code within a UEB context, we use these code switch symbols for the Nemeth code. Our opening Nemeth code indicator is dots 4, 5, 6 and 1, 4, 6. Our Nemeth code terminator, I exercised some restraint there in not using an Arnold Schwarzenegger voice to say the Nemeth code terminator. That is dots 4, 5, 6 and 1, 5, 6. And that gets a little parentheses that says Nemeth code symbol. So that's what happens on our special symbols pages, because technically the Nemeth code terminator only happens once Nemeth code is in effect. So this dots 4, 5, 6, 1, 5, 6 has the meaning of Nemeth code terminator only when Nemeth code is in effect. That is to say, only after the opening Nemeth code indicator has put Nemeth code into effect. And that's why the opening Nemeth code indicator does not, on a special symbols page, get that parenthesis Nemeth code symbol. The opening Nemeth code indicator, if we push up our nerd glasses, real technically is a UEB symbol. And just like the Nemeth code terminator, the single word switch indicator gets parentheses cap Nemeth cap code symbol. And our single word switch indicator is dot 6, dots 3. Please remember the function of that symbol is right there in its name. It is a single word switch indicator. It's for just one single word at a time. We talked last time a little bit about Braille order. Please note these symbols are listed on the special symbols page and are listed here on the screen in Braille order. So the opening Nemeth Code indicator begins with dots 4, 5, 6. So that's our third Braille cell configuration in line 7. And the Nemeth Code terminator starts with that same cell configuration. The single word switch indicator starts with a dot 6, which is our 7th symbol in line 7 of Braille order. And that's why the single word switch indicator is listed after both the opening Nemeth Code indicator and the Nemeth Code terminator. And the Nemeth Code terminator's second symbol is dots 1, 5, 6. The opening Nemeth Code indicator's second cell is dots 1, 4, 6. And the 1, 4, 6 comes before that WH contraction in Braille order. So in Braille order, our opening Nemeth Code indicator is listed before our Nemeth Code terminator. And both of those are listed before the single word switch indicator. One more note about special symbols pages. There is a sort of sample special symbols page up on the screen right now, and we're looking at some of the symbols listed, including opening transcribers note indicator, closing transcribers note indicator, the section sign, boldface word, boldface passage indicator, and then after the boldface terminator, the opening Nemeth Code indicator. And it so happens that on this special symbols page, the next symbol in Braille order for the special symbols page is Nemeth Code terminator, and it gets our parentheses, capital Nemeth, cap code symbol, close parentheses. Then on this special symbols page, there's also the opening parenthesis listed, the closing parenthesis. We actually go on to our second page of special symbols where we get the capitals terminator. And then we finally get to that last Nemeth Code switch indicator we talked about, and that's the single word switch indicator. So on this special symbols page, the transcriber chose to list both the single word switch indicator and the capitals terminator because they have the same dot configuration. The single word switch indicator, dots 6, 3, has the single word switch, meaning when it's in Nemeth Code. And dots 6, 3 has the capitals terminator, meaning when it is in UEB.
Kyle,
Yeah.
if I could just intersect and ask a quick question before moving on, and if we're going to get to this too, you let me know. Going back to that great example that you shared from the previous example of the Jungle Book, I can't recall what you had placed it, but it was the examples of those numbered items. Some of the numbers included were written in UEB, and some of the number, yes, at the beginning began with using Nemeth. We had a question, a point of clarification that's needed from an attendee in the audience about knowing when you begin with the UEB at the start of a number problem and or when it might be Nemeth.
That's a reasonable question and a pretty common one. The rule of thumb that I find very useful is it is appropriate to open Nemeth Code immediately before it is necessary. So in this example, we have the opening Nemeth Code indicator that follows the item identifier 1 because the content of item number 1 is 2 + 2 = 4. And it is a common temptation to place the Nemeth Code, the opening Nemeth Code indicator before the number 1. However, we don't have a really good place to put that in this transcription. So it goes right before the material that absolutely needs it. To be clear and kind, it would not be giving the Braille reader incorrect information for this switch indicator to be at the end of the heading that precedes the series of items. It also would not give the Braille reader incorrect information to place this switch indicator immediately before the item identifier, maybe on a line by itself. And similarly, it would not give the Braille reader incorrect information to place the opening Nemeth Code indicator on this same line with the item identifier and content. Now, if I could go back through those options and tell you why I didn't do them. I didn't place the opening Nemeth Code switch indicator at the end of the heading, the centered heading that precedes the series of items, because that's really far away from the content. And when I read Braille, I sometimes struggle to pay attention all the way to the end of a long heading and still be processing information before I dive into a series of items. That's why I chose not to put the opening Nemeth Code indicator at the end of the centered heading before the series of items. Similarly, I chose not to take up a whole nother line to have the opening Nemeth Code indicator on a line by itself before the start of the items. I chose not to do that because I knew that the whole series of items was not going to be in Nemeth Code. I knew that a lot of the content of item number 3 was going to be in UEB, so I'm going to have to do some switching in and out of codes within the series of items. If all of the items were things like 2 + 2 = 4, 4 + 4 = 8, 5 + 5 = 10, and all of the items were like that, then I would have done it this way with the opening Nemeth Code indicator on a line by itself before the series of itemized items. But I chose not to do that here because I knew that within the items, I was going to have to do a lot of code switching. The other place I chose not to put the code switch indicator, and this is mentioned in the guidance for transcription using Nemeth within UEB contexts. I chose not to put the opening Nemeth Code indicator on this line immediately before the identifier because we are striving to have the identifiers navigable down the left side of the page. And if we put a code switch indicator here, then what the reader encounters on the left side of the page is the code switch indicator, not the item identifier. We do want them to encounter the item identifiers immediately on the left side of the page. So with those options taken away, the appropriate place in this instance for the opening Nemeth Code indicator was right after the number 1 identifier. And then I think the other part of the question was probably about some of the item identifiers are transcribed in Nemeth Code, and some of the item identifiers are transcribed in UEB, and it's ugly. And it's correct. It's very acceptable. And the way that the codes are supposed to be used to, when the context is like this one, and we have an item that ends with technical material and the next item starts with technical material, the item identifier of the sort of second item is going to be in Nemeth Code. We just let Nemeth Code roll on over. And that reduces the number of code switch indicators that we have, because we don't want to be doing the equivalent of flicking the lights on and off, changing codes all the time, or turning the stereo way up and way down, way up and way down. We want to reduce the amount of switching that we're doing. And that's why we let the effect of the Nemeth Code indicator roll on over item identifiers on a regular basis in order to reduce the amount of switching. I hope that answers your question. If not, Lord knows we will have more question opportunities as we continue.
I thought that was fabulous. I love your command of the content and the knowledge and skill that you shared with us. Thank you.
I love these terms and these codes. So let's look at some very basic. This is not all of the Nemeth Code symbols, but I hope these will start to open some folds in your brain and bring other things back as well. Our digits in Nemeth Code, when preceded by our digits in Nemeth Code are in the lower part of the cell. So this is, what is this? Line 4 or 5 of Braille order. So this is the first 10 configurations of the Braille cell pushed down into the lower part of the cell. That's where our digits for Nemeth Code live. Our simple fraction indicators, the opening is .1456. And the closing simple fraction indicator is .3456. Our decimal point in Nemeth Code is not just a run-of-the-mill period. Our Nemeth Code decimal point is .46. And again, when we're within Nemeth Code, so when we are between switch indicators, that's when these symbols come into play. Our Nemeth Code plus is .346. You know that's not all of them. You also know we don't have time to go through all of the Nemeth symbols today.
And we have more resources for UEB with Nemeth. And some of those are as follows. The first one is Quizlet flashcards from Braille Trainer, which is Kyle's user on Quizlet. And then Pearson's Nemeth Symbol Library. And Kyle's going to go over to their web page for Pearson. And once you're out there, this is an online source. You can click on a term that you're wanting more information on. So once you click on that term, it's going to give you a written verbal description of the term. And then also at the bottom, it's going to have a BRF and then also a PDF samples for that term and context. Also cheat sheets, online courses, any organizational trainings. That could be through us, it could be through APH. I'm trying to think of a few other, of course, Hadley.
If you guys want to throw into the chat something that's a UEB with Nemeth resource that you've found really useful.
Yes. Any knowledge that you all have for resources, also sharing is caring is what I always say. It helps everybody. And then Project
resource that
Inspires free on-demand self-paced courses.
So this is something that I just recently started to get really acquainted with, and this is coming out of the University of South Carolina. INSPIRE is a sort of acronym for increasing the STEM potential of individuals who read Braille, with the goal of supporting youth in grades 6 through 12 and young adults and building their skills in the 2 Braille codes used in the US for STEM classes. The Project INSPIRE has put together a couple of courses which have videos that go along with them, and those are available in the here link on the Project INSPIRE. The self-paced courses are hosted on the Paths to Literacy website, and again, you can get to that from the Project INSPIRE website. And those are a couple of courses that you can explore. There's grades 2 to 5, Nemeth Code, there's Nemeth Code with UEB context, strategies for supporting pre-K through first grade students, and an introduction to Nemeth Code symbols used in grades 2 to 5, and strategies for supporting elementary students in building math skills. So again, those are some self-paced videos with homework that you can go through. Project INSPIRE also is offering some kind of 6-week live not in person, but real-time instruction as well. So if you're looking for some very curriculum-like instruction for UEB with Nemeth, then Project INSPIRE's courses are one place to look. Let's just touch briefly on common issues in Nemeth Code transcriptions. So sometimes transcribers, Braille users, students, we use upper cell numbers instead of lower cell numbers, even when we're in Nemeth Code. This could be a muscle memory or a miscommunication with the transcription software issue. So relatively common issue in Nemeth Code transcriptions to have upper cell numbers where we're meant to have lower cell numbers. Another common issue is missing a baseline indicator where we needed one. So if we've gone into the superscript, perhaps, like in X superscript 2 plus 5, this actually means that the 2 plus 5 is all in the superscript position. Whereas if we have X superscript 2 baseline indicator plus 5, that means it's X squared plus 5. Can we have if you have any other insights about common issues in the Nemeth Code transcriptions that you find yourself experiencing, or that students that students experience, if you are a student and you have a common issue in Nemeth Code transcription and you'd like to share that, now would be the time.
And if y'all want, just put it in the chats and we can look at those.
Sounds great. I'm not seeing anything jump up right away, so we will keep going and we will look back in on that. So what's next for the Nemeth Code? First, let's take some words right from the Nemeth Code. Although the code is intended to be as complete as possible, finality can never be achieved by any code. In the course of the rapid development in the fields of science and technology, new signs are constantly being devised and old ones modified. This is from section 1.c of the Nemeth Code. And I actually had the opportunity to speak with Dorothy Worthington about the Nemeth Code. She's the chair of BANA's, she is the current chair of BANA's Nemeth Code Technical Committee. And I have a recording of the interview she and I were able to do just recently, which I'm going to play for you now. I'm going to play for you in just a moment. Come on, computer. So we are recording and I will ask you that first question. What is the current overarching goal of the BANA Nemeth Code Technical Committee?
Well, we were charged by the BANA board. I don't know, it's been 4 years.
Greetings from Adelaide,
Oh my
South
goodness.
Australia.
With,
Half a week.
making a major revision of the Nemeth Code that would incorporate all of the relevant updates and include the guidance for transcription. So that's what we've been working on. Our committee is made up of transcribers, teachers of the visually impaired, and Braille readers. And our goal is to get board approval for our document this year.
So you are expecting to have all of those updates and the guidance incorporated into a sort of updated Nemeth Code this year?
Yes, we actually have done the work, and we're preparing to submit it for review. But having done the work that's not the end of it.
Sure. Will that updated Nemeth Code book, when it gets published, will it be searchable?
Well, I know it's going to be accessible and it'll be available in both PDF and BRF formats, but I couldn't get the publications committee to commit to it being searchable. It'll depend on how they end up deciding how to put it together. I know Braille formats is searchable because you can have a PDF that includes all of the rules in one file. But I don't know if that's what they're planning to do with Nemeth or if they're releasing it as individual file for each rule. So I can't guarantee it'll be searchable.
Okay.
I would say in an individual rule, it would be searchable.
Even that would be a great improvement over the way that the code is currently published.
Right. Well, the code, you can turn it into a searchable PDF, one rule at a time, but as a whole, the book is a picture. The current code is not editable text, it's a picture.
Gotcha. Once that updated Nemeth Code is published, will there still be a separate guidance for UEB with Nemeth?
No, once we incorporate it all, there will not be, the errata will be gone. The errata to the 1972 code that we all use, that will be gone. The guidance will be gone. And I'm trying to make that clear in the code itself that once this is released, don't go looking for the guidance somewhere. I mean, because it will be, all of the rules of the guidance will be inside the Nemeth Code.
Beautiful.
There won't be any need to go for a separate document.
This might be a snarky question, but why does it take so long to make a code update?
Well, there are so many steps. I mean, we spent basically 4 years putting together what we felt like is a usable document with all the updates and the changes. But we're not the last step. You know, we're the first step. So once we submit it, it has to be reviewed, a technical review, to make sure that we aren't clashing with another code, that the rules are understandable. I'm hoping that they're mostly going to go for we can understand what you've written here, so go and do more. But once it's reviewed technically, it has to be then we have to take it back and fix anything that they have made comments on that we can fix. And then it has to be reviewed again by the publications committee. And not only do we have to go through all those reviews, all the pictures in our document have to have alt text. We have to make it accessible. We have to I don't know what it's called, but all the math type. All the math has to be described. So there's a lot, and I think we have to draw the pictures. We're not sure, but all the like arcs and arrows and plus signs and everything are supposed to be done tactily. So we have that to do yet. We have to do the alt text, and hopefully we won't be the ones responsible for the final version of that, because that's not our area of expertise. So what else?
So when this updated Nemeth Code that y'all have been working on and pulling together is published, it's going to be a beautifully cohesive, accessible document or set of documents.
That's the goal, yes. And the publications committee does really good work. It just takes them a long time. So we have to be aware of the formatting of our document and the structure and how it's numbered. And, you know, there were just a lot of things go into it besides just the knowledge of Nemeth Code. We will have a change document that'll accompany it that will let transcribers know what parts have changed and that they better look up rather than assume they know. Because we are proposing some changes to the code to try to make it easier for people to follow the rules and know what the rules are.
That's very exciting. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain.
Sure.
I think I saw some talk in the chat as this interview with Dorothy was playing. That interview is about the updating of the official Nemeth Code, our primary source for Nemeth Code, and that is what any instruction manuals, cheat sheets, lessons, courses are based on. I'm going to go ahead and steal this slide. The current Nemeth Code course, what can be referred to often as the yellow book, because the print is bound in yellow. As of today, which is February 12th, 2021, the NLS Braille Mathematics Braille transcribing course and certification are EBAE based. So the current course on Nemeth that is active and has graders and an exam to get certified, that is based on EBAE, does not use any UEB, does not use code switch indicators, and that is currently the only active Nemeth Code course, which is administered by the National Federation of the Blind for the National Library Service. The provisional revised Nemeth within UEB course does exist as material you can study, but it is not currently an active course, and there is not currently a path to certification in Nemeth within UEB or UEB with Nemeth. A word from the provisional course is, due to the need to make this training manual available to transcribers as soon as possible, we are offering a provisional version of the lessons in downloadable electronic format before being completely field tested and while BANA is revising the Nemeth Code. Exercises at the end of each lesson will not be available until a path towards certification is established, which can only happen once the updated Nemeth Code is finalized. Those words about what's available for Nemeth within UEB from NLS are from the About section of the Provisional Nemeth Code course. And yes, when a Nemeth Code within UEB certification becomes available, it will reflect the updated Nemeth Code.
And now it's time for another poll. So this poll number 2, what process or processes, did you use to transcribe the quote Jungle Book math practice? Was it A, ASCII math, B, 6-key entry, C, LaTeX, D is scientific notebook, E is math type, or F, any other type of transcription?
What process did you use? So what sort of software tools did you use? Did you do it all 6-key entry? Or did you use ASCII math, which is something that Braille Blaster uses?
And in the interest of time, I am going to stop that so that you can actually get to your next one, Kyle. And out of those who are able to answer, 6-key entry is really what won, 50%. And a chunk, huge chunk, 23% of other.
That is a really accurate reflection of my understanding of how math transcription happens in the world. There are so many other ways to transcribe. Direct 6-key entry is what we can use, or slate and stylus entry is what anybody can use anywhere without tools. And whatever else you use, because there's loads of different programs and ways to transcribe. In fact, there is no magic transcription tool. All we or anyone else can help you do in terms of math transcription is helping you achieve a solid foundation in the Braille code that you're working with, so that you can evaluate your dot output and then adjust your input process. If you know what the dots need to be, then you can experiment with any of the multitude of ways to transcribe and figure out a process that works best for you and the tools that are available to you and or your team. We are next time going to speak in depth about Braille transcription software programs in the Does Braille Formatting Spark Joy webinar. I want to draw attention to just one thing. If you downloaded the slides, there is probably a change here that Braille 2000 has historically been criticized for its lack of accessibility, but wait, there is actually a talking edition of Braille 2000. And that's all I'm going to say about Braille transcription softwares today. Let's talk about UEB math science. Here's a quick overview of some UEB characteristics. I would say UEB is consistent. When you see a symbol, it looks the same regardless. UEB I would characterize as remarkably back translatable. So print to Braille goes smoothly, usually through a computer software program. And Braille to print often goes smoothly through a Braille transcription software program. UEB is remarkably back translatable. I would describe UEB as, in contrast to Nemeth Code, slightly less meaning-based and slightly more representative of print. So for example, the left angle bracket is the same print sign for the grouping and also for less than symbol, and we use the same Braille cell configurations for both the opening angle bracket and the less than symbol. That's dots 4, 1, 2, 6. I would describe UEB as more representative of print than Nemeth Code. A point of clarification, UEB is all one code. So the rules of UEB is part of the rules of UEB, and the guidelines for technical material are an extension of those rules. So UEB and guidelines for technical material, sort of their powers combined to make one unified English Braille code, which can be used for literary and technical material. Let's take, well, we can come back to reviewing the UEB math science transcription of the homework. I want to make sure that we get to let me hit 2 highlights, and then I want to make sure we get to some words from the current chair of the UEB Code Maintenance Committee. Our Jungle Book Math Practice transcription, the title is exactly the same as it was in the UEB with Nemeth transcription. And the words are exactly the same because they're in UEB, both for our UEB with Nemeth and our UEB Math Science transcription. Please let me draw your attention to item number 4, which is the 2 times 2 is less than. There's our angle bracket symbol, which is also the less than symbol. Dots 4, 1, 2, 6. And the last part of that is 5. The one other thing I want to highlight is the use of the grade 1 symbol indicator here with the X that's standing alone. This X has a space before and after it. So we have to have some kind of grade 1ification so that we're not saying 6 is greater than or equal to it. The importance of grade 1 mode in UEB transcriptions, and especially in UEB math science transcriptions, really is paramount.
And here are some primary sources for UEB math science. There's ICEB's UEB page, which is iceb.org, and then /UEB.html. And then there is the hard copy of the rules of UEB 2nd edition 2013, and that's a print hard copy with updates. And guidelines for technical material with updates, including the new section 3.
We're running out of time. We're gonna blaze through our UEB math science symbols. Our numeric fraction line is dots 3, 4. The cross multiplier, so that's the one that sort of looks like an X floating in the middle of the line, is dots 5 and 2, 3, 6. Our general fraction indicators, which we use for any fraction that includes something other than a number, are opening dots 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, closing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and our general fraction line, which separates the numerator from the denominator, is dots 4, 6, 3, 4. And our plus, all of our symbols of operation start with a dot 5 in UEB math science, and the plus is dot 5, 2, 3, 5.
More resources for UEB math science are Quizlet flashcards from Braille Trainer, which is available from Kyle on Quizlet. That's her username, which is Braille Trainer. There is UEB Online's math modules. Also, there's cheat sheets, online courses, organizational trainings as well.
There are always more resources.
Yes.
Common issues might include not using grade 1 mode. So many of our symbols used in UEB have grade 2 meanings, and so we have to properly grade 1ify them for them to have their appropriate meaning. So like our general fraction indicators are the same cell configuration as the of and with contractions. So if we don't use grade 1, then our fraction a over b can read as of a some kind of line b with what? Sometimes we get so much text that's actually available in UEB that we can push right through our computer program and get Braille that we miss out on text, or we copy over a symbol. I certainly do this. I copy over a symbol I think is gonna go fine, and it ends up being unidentified. And there are always more. All right, let's hear a few words from Kathy Reeson, who is the current chair of ICEB's Code Maintenance Committee, about what's next for UEB math science.
Okay. Greetings from Adelaide, South Australia, half a world away. My name is Kathy Reeson, a sighted transcriber at the South Australian School for Visually Impaired and the newly appointed chair of the Code Maintenance Committee of the International Council on English Braille. As such, my expertise in technical materials is in the use of Unified English Braille. The committee consists of a representative from each member country of ICEB. However, there is a larger group of observers who, whilst not having a vote, equally join in the discussion, mainly via email listservs. A separate technical guidelines subgroup was formed to look at a full revision of the guidelines for technical material, which was written in 2008. An updated version, which made some corrections but is fundamentally the same, was released in 2014. Whilst this document has met the needs for which it was written, it does not fully cover all of the complexities of the technical material, and there are some decisions which were made which need to be revised, remembering that this document was written before the finalisation of the rules of Unified English Braille. So the goal of the guidelines, as the guidelines are updated, is to produce a document that which is both clear and provides plenty of examples to cover the breadth of related topics. Rather than trying to produce the document as a whole, it is being updated section by section. The section on signs of operation and comparison is complete, and the section on omissions is nearing completion. Following this, I'm hoping to look at the first section, which encompasses general rules, including the guidelines for the use of the grade 1 indicators, a topic which I'm anticipating will create lively discussion. Updating a document such as this is a long, slow process. As each rule is looked at, it has to be carefully tested against as many examples as possible to determine its validity. Members and observers are very good at saying, what about in this or that context, which then sends us back to the drawing board to make revisions. Whilst we would like to speed up the process, it is important to ensure that all the decisions made will not need later revision. Each time a draft is produced, it is distributed in both print and Braille. And when a revision is finally ready for approval, a vote is taken by the voting members, and then the revision is ratified by the executive of the ICEB before it is announced and published on the website. Will we ever be finished updating the technical guidelines? No. We have a statement in Australia that as soon as the Sydney Harbour Bridge has been painted, it is time to start again. Language is constantly changing. The Braille code developed by Louis Braille, whilst fundamentally unchanged, is now much, much more. The mathematical material that I'm transcribing for schools today, whilst fundamentally the same as when I was at school 50 years ago, has differences. There are new concepts and new symbols. Braille has to be able to keep up with those differences. Just as there is a need to be constantly looking at the rule book to keep up with changes in non-technical material, there will always be a need to keep looking at where the technical guidelines need to be updated.
So as of right now, oh no, go ahead, Dawn.
Sorry about that. As of right now, the UEB technical course, so as of today, 2/12/2021, there is no NLS course in using UEB for math and science. CNIB's UEB Technical is a self-directed course in UEB for technical material. It is not an instruction manual. There are practices on there. Isn't that correct, Kyle? There's practices on CNIB's UEB Technical.
Yeah,
website?
but you don't get a grader to go along with the course.
Right. Okay. And I know it's almost 3, so I didn't want to take up anything else, Kyle, unless there was something else you wanted to say.
We are going to talk more about Braille certifications on Friday, March 5th from 1 to 2. So that's going to be our certification session as part of this Come Back to Me Braille series. And I know we've used these phrases a couple of times. I want to specifically say about terminology. The Braille Authority of North America in September of 2020 adopted a document entitled Terminology, UEB Math/Science, and UEB with Nemeth. So those are the banner recommended terms for these 2 ways of transcribing math and science material. We are not going to do the Braille formats poll. Instead, we're going to go take some time to look in a detailed way over that UEB transcription of the homework material. So again, our print is this Jungle Book math practice, and it's 6 items. Our UEB math science key transcription goes a little bit like this, where we have the opening quote, cap jungle, cap book, closing quote, math practice 4, and then today's date, APH webinar, the italic passage. Again, this heading is just exactly like it was in the UEB with Nemeth transcription. So our item then number 1 is simply the item identifier, number 2, and our plus symbol of operation. So that's .5, dots 2, 3, 5. And then in the number 2, our equals symbol, which is .5, dots 2, 3, 5, 6, and number 4, because 2 plus 2 equals 4. Then our item number 2, we're going to have a grade 1 passage indicator for x equals open general fraction. So this is our fraction minus, again, our symbol of operation has a .5, b, and then our plus minus, that's dots 4, 5, 6, and 2, 3, 5. The radical symbol, b, and a superscript number 2. The superscript indicator's effect terminates after this item, that's the number. And then we have minus, number 4, and AC. We need a grade 1 symbol indicator here, even though we're already in a grade 1 passage, because if we didn't have it, that A could be misread as a 1, and even the AC as a 13. So we have 4 grade 1 symbol indicator, AC plus. No, not a plus, sorry. This is the radical terminator. So now our square root is finished. Then we have a general fraction line and the denominator number 2a. Again, grade 1 symbol indicator for the letter that only has dots in the upper part of the cell when it follows a digit. And finally, our general fraction end indicator. So item number 3, let's see if I can make it even bigger. Yes. Item number 3 goes cap over the weekend, comma, it rained a total of number 15 inches, period, capital if number 12, period 5. So that's a decimal or a period. And the period has the same dot configuration, whether it's functioning as a decimal or as a grammatical period. Inches of rain fell on, capital Saturday, comma, how many inches of rain fell on, capital Sunday, question mark. So item number 4 is number 2, and then we know we have a symbol of operation here because it has a .5 and then the lower cell construction. This is our multiplication, our cross multiplication indicator that looks like an X floating in the middle of the print line. And then our number 2, less than number 5. Our less than is the same print and Braille construction as the opening angle bracket. So then let's scroll up a little bit and get snuggly with item number 5. We have number 6 is greater than or equal to. So our greater than or equal to is a 3-cell construction, which includes the greater than or closing right angle bracket. And then before that has 4, 5, 6. So our greater than or equal to symbol is 4, 5, 6, 4, 3, 4, 5. And that is 6 greater than or equal to X. Our X here is standing alone, so it has to be grade 1ified in some way. And that's why it has a grade 1 symbol indicator before it. And then item number 6 simply reads capital Mowgli, like the character from the Jungle Book, took 1/2. So this is a numeric fraction. The numerator and the denominator are nothing but numbers. So we have 1 numeric fraction line, 2 of capital Baloo's, apostrophe S, number 10, mangoes, period. Capital how many mangoes did Cap Mowgli take, question mark. And that brings us to the end of our UEB math science transcription of the Jungle Book math practice for today's webinar. I'm glad we got to take the time to look specifically at the dots for that transcription as well as the UEB with Nemeth transcription. Let's hook us down to the end here. So you can know to join us next time for Does Braille Formatting Spark Joy? And here's our contact information.
Thank you all so much. I'm Dawn Eadens, and my email information is up there. So if you all have any questions or anything I can help you with, I will be glad to do so.
Thank you both so very much. We look forward to next time.
Thank you.